The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Jonathan Salama, who is the co-founder and CEO at Transfix. And we're going to talk to Jonathan to hear a little bit about his story, how he came to be a co-founder in Transfix. And we're also going to talk about their recent move to sell off their brokerage business and focus on the tech side of the business, which they've also been building alongside that brokerage, and talk a little bit about how logistics has changed over time and why that tech focus is so important right now and how that's going to help to grow and evolve the logistics business well into the future. So, Jonathan, you've had me on the Transfix podcast twice now, actually, so I appreciate that. And now it's time to get Transfix on our podcast. So how are you, sir? It's good to see you today.
I'm good. Yeah, it's good to see you, and thanks for having me. I'm excited about the conversation.
Definitely happy to get you on. Happy to talk to you about this, especially at so close to, I guess, a pivotal time kind of in your company and how you've kind of going into the next generation, which we'll dive into here in a little bit. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of came to found Transfix.
Yeah, I'm actually from France. And I moved to the US for college. Okay. I went to University of Miami for a computer engineering degree. I graduated. I found my way into the startup world where I started my career at Gilt. It was a e-commerce in New York. We saw like great traction and great growth. 4 years in, I decided to join another startup. And from them, I got really the bug of I want to start my own startup. But I didn't know what it would be. So I started talking to people. I started pitching different ideas. I couldn't settle on the right one. I just couldn't find what it would be. But I met my co-founder, Drew, and we actually went to a bar. And it's the first time sort of heard of the concept of there are full truckloads and there are less than truckloads. and this is all like this gigantic, messy part around full truckload. And he told me everything he knew, and I just sort of fell in love about the concept. This was 11 years ago, and back then there were very, very little discussions about technology and logistics, especially full truckload. There were almost no conversation about it. And so we came in, we like to think that we're the first one to think through how tech can be really applied at that level. And we essentially started that day when we met.
Interesting. So I'm curious there. I mean, you worked with Gilt Group, which was, doing e-commerce. And, I was a customer of theirs in the past, so I'm familiar there. I got a couple of things from them a way back time when I was in college and stuff. But yeah, I mean, so I guess when you started to hear about this FTL idea and, I guess this freight side and the trucking side of this, I mean, what really caught your attention there? Like, what did you think was so interesting about that? Because I think people maybe would be like, trucks, So it's interesting to hear.
I mean, I got that a lot.
Yeah.
I came home from meeting Drew at the bar. Talked to my wife, I'm going to start this trucking company. She's like, no, you're not. We'll talk about it tomorrow. You're likely not. 11 years ago, we're still here. But to me, it was a couple of things. One, through pitching different ideas and different concepts, different people, I realized that there's always like 3 or 4 things that everybody comes back to. The first one is the size of the market. How big, if you actually crush it and you take a big percentage of the market, how is that? Is that big enough? And the concept of big enough, I had a struggle. This is a $1 billion market. Yeah. So if you're successful, you might get 10%. That might not be big enough. but trucking it's extremely, extremely large, right? And so that really passed that bar with flying colors. The other one that I was looking for is I knew I wasn't going to be the market expert or the expert in whichever company I wanted to start, because my strength was in building the technology. So I needed a partner that did know everything. And Drew just, his father was in the business. He took over his family, but like he already had like really high contacts at high places. Like it was like he checked everything I wanted in a partner. And I think the third one is how behind is that industry when coming to technology. And that I had to like take a leap of faith because I didn't know anything about the industry. But our first few meetings were just about showing trucks on maps. And that was already received was, whoa, that is incredible. Meanwhile, the Uber has been around for quite a bit back then still, right? Seeing a car on a map. It wasn't crazy tech for the regular world, for the B2C, like anybody, but for logistics, that was a lot. And so when you put all those three pieces together, I got really excited really quickly.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I love that you point out that, tech was not really prevalent in the industry like back then, 10, 11 years ago, I think you said. And, it's pretty interesting to think about that, right? Because I think even today, in some cases, like we think about, our consumer facing tech, right? In our, I guess you call normal, regular lives, right? Versus like the tech we see at the places we work or the industries that we work in. I think there's more, there's more equality there, I guess now we could say, but like 10 years ago, I mean, it was like a stark difference, right? And it was not kind of like, there weren't many people questioning that, I guess, in the sense to say like, why is my regular life like so tech advanced? And then I go to work and I'm like so behind on tech, right? In a lot of aspects, especially in logistics and in the warehousing industry. So I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about kind of how the business has evolved from like kind of those initial discoveries and that spark of interest in the industry. I mean, how did you kind of kick off this business and what was the initial focus and how did that continue to evolve over time?
Yeah, the initial focus has in the early day was we're going to be a broker, and we're going to figure out how to automate every step that we take. Every step, no matter how small, every step of humans taking that is not worth doing because it doesn't grow the business. It's just very tactical. How do we make sure they either don't do it or they do it as like faster than anybody else? Maybe it's like by giving them the right tools, by showing the right data points at the right time, or by just automating that step altogether. It took a while. It wasn't in day one. We had a roadmap. We knew exactly what those automations would be, and we would go, right. It would be we build the minimum platform. It's just baseline. Within the first like 6 months or 7 months, we had like the iPhone app, the Android app, the platform. We could track, we could follow trucks on the map, put ETAs, do all that. That was our baseline platform, right? And then as we grew, as we attracted customers to this idea that it can be better tech that to serve them. And when I say customer, I mean actually both the shippers and the trucking companies who we've always treated as customer, not vendors. Yeah. And so once you get that baseline platform, what are the steps? Like there is this one step that our account managing team always does. And that's just accepting tenders, making sure they're online on a Sunday at 1 p.m. because they know that shipper ABC is going to be tendering them a shipment and they need to approve it before 2 p.m. So come online at that time. Just great. That seems like an easy step to automate. Yeah. But actually it was really hard because then you got to understand, okay, but they don't always accept it. And they reject it. Yeah. So like the first step was automate the exception. The second step was automate the rejection. The third step is like automate the tree of like how one, and it's over decade worth of work that we started nailing all of these pieces coming together. And it was almost 4 or 5 months ago now that as a business, we realized that like our tech is, the brokerage definitely has values. We work with like great customers. We had significant growth, but our true secret sauce, the real value, if you wish, was all that tech that we've built. And then it was how to go to market with that tech. And I've said this before, I don't believe broker buy software from brokers. Right? Like, it's not a good fit. It's not a good alignment. There's no trust. And I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't buy, if I were a broker, I wouldn't buy software from broker either.
Yeah.
So we started thinking and ended up meeting Dave Browing at a dinner that he hosted. And frankly, the guy is just awesome. We like understood each other right away, saw the vision for both right away. He saw the value in the brokerage and the tech, and we thought that was the right opportunity to give this a shot. Yeah. So sold the brokerage to NFI and are now looking internally at all these tools that we had available for ourselves. How do we package them into solutions for the market?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting too, because I mean, you, in a sense, by, starting out with the brokerage and building that up alongside the tech, you kind of, I guess you kind of proved out the tech yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We had a lab that's we had the unique opportunity to have a lab right next to us in a sense where if we, in the early days, pre-COVID, one of the things that used to attract engineers to us the most was when you'd launch a feature, you could hear the other side of the office cheering because they've been waiting for it. They're excited. We launch it. And then people are like, whoa, this is awesome. And although like COVID made it a lot hard to hear the cheers, like you would see them on our Slack or our internal like messaging, and you would see like the direct impact that our tech would have. And you would know very quickly if we launch something that doesn't work, you would hear that also quickly. And you would hear the feedback right away and how to make things better. And we believe that like that makes us like very, very unique to enter the brokerage space as a SaaS provider. Because like you said, we've been building it with a broker in that right next to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And it's definitely like immediate feedback, right? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the most fun when you hear them cheer.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. So now you've kind of built this up over time and you've now sold off the brokerage to NFI, which is a great company as well. Also in New Jersey. We're both in New Jersey, based out of New Jersey.
Yep.
And we've had them on the podcast before too. So, now the focus turns to the tech side of the business. So I'm curious, before we dive into more of the tech on this side of the business, why don't you tell us too, additionally, like from that time that you started 11 years ago and you learned about FTL in this bar, and then your wife said you're crazy and this isn't happening, and now you're saying I told you so. I mean, how has logistics kind of evolved, and what stands out to you over the last 11 years on how things have really kind of changed in that landscape?
Yeah, the first big, I think there are many macro events that happen in full truckload that made it so that like technology keeps accelerating. I think the first one was we started when truck drivers started getting smartphones. There's a big delay from when regular consumer had smartphone to when truck drivers start having smartphones. And that was one of the first catalysts that made it so that you can now have your app in the hands of the drivers, which is, I think, a big difference. We had a major acceleration in the tech ecosystem of full truckload. I think then over time, we started having the ELD mandate that came in that also started putting more techs in the truck. And allowed broker to think, how do I connect with my carrier more? Because at the end, the number one product that broker have is their carrier base. You can have the best tech in the world. If you have no carriers, what are you really selling, right? And so it's that connectivity between the broker and the carrier that just kept getting stronger over time and creating different type of relationship between brokers and carriers. And I think that's the bedrock or like behind everything in our industry when it comes to technology and brokerage.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear kind of that intersection there almost in like the adoption of how, like you said, the drivers now getting more smartphones and, getting that kind of penetration from that tech side. Like that certainly enables a lot more. And I think it's pretty interesting because I think now in some cases we kind of like take the smartphone for granted, right? But that it changed a lot from like a consumer perspective, but it's also changed so much from the business perspective too. And I think that's a perfect example there where, we say that, now that the drivers were getting, more penetration on the smartphone side, now the tech is coming into the industry further and it kind of expands what you're able to do on that side. So tell us a little bit now that, you've gone full focus on the tech side of the business. How does that kind of change things for Transfix, and how does that change things even for the industry as a whole as you start to target that more?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Yeah, and even before I go there, there's another big macro thread that happens over the last decade is just the ability to launch like complex data science models within any industry at a level that's usable for everyone, right? And I think that's another aspect that like drastically changed in the last decades. And I'm not talking about the Gen AI movement and the LLMs out there. I'm talking more about just the ability that freight brokers have had to predict rates have gone from just completely manuals to completely automated. And I think how we've been thinking, but how the industry's been thinking about we need to be like just more accurate in our prediction has also put a lot of both pressure in the market, but also placed a lot of investments in those technology, because it is before we came in, it was hard to find the right partners to show you what your cost is. It's very different to understand what your cost is versus the market cost.
Yeah. I think that's a great point too, because there is like additional pressure that's come, right? Especially as like the landscape of the consumer has changed a little bit, and there's been like a push towards maximizing what we can do with FTLs specifically. How can we maximize the cube of those and reduce overall carbon footprint and all those things too as well along the way. Certainly pushes more towards the tech side, because I think you said a key word in there, which is the pressure, right? It's not just like pressure on the market. It's not pressure on the capacity of the market, but it's pressure on the people, right? That have to try and connect those dots and make those things happen. So bringing that tech in certainly helps to alleviate some of that pressure. So tell us a little bit about, with the increased focus on the tech side, I mean, how is that going to, I guess, change the way Transfix does business, or how is that going to enable you to do even more and expand upon that?
Yeah, I think for now, our phase one is to enable our new customers to have the tech that we used to have that we took for granted on a day-to-day basis, because we've been building it for so long. And there's there's three big categories that we're targeting. Right? The first one I mentioned in data science, understanding your own cost is not something that it is extremely hard, first and foremost, but it has tremendous impact on your bottom line, on your business, on your carriers, on your shippers. And so we've commercialized our own algorithm to take in your data and train it with it to come up with your cost model, which we believe it can really impact the bottom line of any business. So that's data science, and data in general is something that we're pushing more and more in the market. The second suite of product, if you wish, is how do you communicate with your carriers? How are you tracking them? How are you collecting their proof of delivery? How are you getting those lumper receipts? How are you showing them available loads that you have? How do you negotiate with them? And how do you do all this in a way that the carrier wants to receive that, but also in a way that's highly efficient and sometimes automated? And the last but not least, I mentioned like this concept of automatically accepting or rejecting loads, all these steps that can be taken to automate or make a step more efficient. We want to go to market with, and we're not here to replace TMS. Like I'm not coming in and saying we're going to build, like we're building our TMS and you got to get it from ground up. Mm-hmm. All these solutions, whether they're from the data side, the carrier side, the automation side, are just built to integrate with what you use. And that's our real focus. Just how to use your tool to make it more efficient.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that efficiency, I mean, we see, I think traditionally, like we've seen so many inefficiencies like on that side, on the trucking side, especially, and that can cause delays or hangups or miscommunications within the supply chain overall. And then it has like kind of this, downstream, even upstream impact as well in the supply chain. So it's great that you're focusing on that and trying to figure out, a better way to do these things and using data to be able to do that. Because I think if you're able to use that data and take action from it, then, it's going to give you better results in the end, or more predictable results in a sense as well. So, tell us a little bit about because this is, the New Warehouse podcast, right? So we got to talk about the warehouse and the shipper side a little bit. So tell us a little bit about, how your technology is going to have or has already had an impact on the shipper side of the equation, whether it's the warehouse fulfillment center or distributor, whatever the case may be. How does your technology kind of impact them?
Yeah. So we've had this for a really long time, but there's two aspects. Mm-hmm. The first one is most customer we used to work with on the shipper side were requiring anywhere from 90 to 95% on-time pickup, on-time delivery. But these rules are not, shippers understand things happen. Yeah. They're not here, like they need that percentage so they can organize their own warehouses. But some of our shippers used to say, okay, like we need 95% on time, but on time means if you're going to be late, you give us 10-hour heads up. Or a 5-hour heads up, whichever, right? And all of our shippers had rules like this. And so within our carrier platform, you can set up the shipper rules so that if a carrier is tracked and we realize, hey, like he's going to be 2 hours late, and we know this 10 hours in advance, automate that conversation with the shipper, let them understand right away, or if you don't want us to communicate with your shipper directly, we can obviously just alert you for you to tell your customer. But having that ability to only worry about the exception makes everything go smoother for brokers and shippers, right? And the warehousing and the warehouse. That's one aspect. The other aspect is around appointment scheduling. There's a lot of tools out there right now that are purely focused on how do I automate appointment scheduling. But then focus on what is the ideal appointment times. For any particular shipment. There is an ideal pickup and delivery to be met. They're ideal for the shippers, they're ideal for the carriers, and they're ideal for the transition time, the driving time. Right? If I have to drive 100 miles, but I do pick up this morning and the delivery in 2 days. Actually, even though like there's only 100 miles, that truck has a lot of time to get delayed, even though it's only 100 miles, because they're probably going to park somewhere for 2 days. And there's a lot of risk that goes with this. And so understanding the right appointment time is a bit, in our opinion, it's more, if not as important as doing the actual scheduling. And that's where we connect with whichever shipper TMS to create those automated appointment times. But we also have very, very complex rules and algorithm around what are the right appointment times for this particular shipper, for this particular warehouse, for this particular shipment or carriers or carriers.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is such a delicate balance sometimes. Right. And I've certainly, as a previous warehouse manager and, dealing with those things, and whether it's late trucks or, lack of communication, I guess, in a sense, like I like that you pointed that out there, that, there's this level that's expected for on-time delivery, but if you're giving us certain notice, like, okay, we can work around that, right? We can rearrange things to do that. Because oftentimes, like you said, on the warehouse side, you need to be able to plan for these things. You need to be able to, have, whether it's the right amount of labor there, or have the space available on your dock to take this in, or, you're waiting on something for a specific project. So you're trying to align that with labor in a different department or something like that. I mean, there's all these parts that connect. So being able to, have better visibility to that, understanding, and, coordinate around that, I think is such a key from the shipper side. So, I think these, tech advancements and enablement of drivers and the carrier side and brokerage side of it, I mean, makes such a difference in kind of that relationship, because I think, there's oftentimes like where you see a little bit of headbutting, I would say, right? Like on the truck side versus like the warehouse side, because, the driver's late and now the driver's upset.
A lot of mistrust.
Because we can't like take that. So, bringing that together and trying to, creates almost the olive branch in between, right?
Yeah.
From the tech side, I mean, makes a huge difference. So really interesting, like how you're focused on that there.
Yeah, and there's other like data product for shippers that are interesting, right? Like, because we could start by with some, we've been doing this with some shippers. If we get your whole like schedule ahead of time, we can start understanding, and we train some of our models to understand what your volume looks like on a weekly basis. We can start telling you like, hey, you love putting an 8 a.m. appointment on like at this location, yet you always hit detention at 8 a.m. on this location because you're hitting too much of a line. And you should be spreading this between 8, 9, 10, 11, or whichever, or next day, whatever. But there is prediction that can be made to smooth out more like appointments. And so our algorithm very often tend to avoid those like heavy volume time, as we see like every time we schedule on Monday at 8 a.m., our truck is going to hit detention. Most trucking companies hate detention.
Yeah.
It's not something they want. They'd rather be driving. So data can be, I think, super powerful in the warehousing space around everything appointment related.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes such a clearer picture sometimes, because you get kind of stuck in your ways a little bit sometimes. Like you mentioned, like, oh, we always do an 8 a.m. appointment, right?
Like 8 a.m.
Yeah, but then you don't realize that, like, oh, like I'm putting myself in a bad spot here, like for everybody and like all parties, right? So very interesting how you're approaching that, and definitely an interesting move to focus more on the tech. I think a good move to be able to do that and continue to expand upon that and make a lot of these critical parts of the supply chain more visible and more actionable through data, and being able to improve upon that. So we talked a little bit about, kind of how the logistics and the business has evolved over the last 11 years. But if we look into the future of logistics, What do you see the future kind of looking like? What stands out to you as something that might be a big trend or something to really keep an eye on over the next few years?
To quote a little bit Dave Browing, he's been talking a lot about this unbundling of the TMS space. I obviously fully agree with it, since that's where we're starting. But I think there is still so much advancement around data science, around Gen AI, around automated trucks. I think our industry in the next decade is going to look completely different from what we know of today. With all this tech coming into their next phases, because we're still very early in everything that I've mentioned so far on this podcast. Everything is fairly nascent, and there's going to be a lot of advancement, a lot of innovation that's going to come in. And I actually think being in logistics is going to be very, very excited in the next maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, but
yeah,
it's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting and exciting space to be in right now and well into the future. And certainly an exciting one 11 years ago when you had that drink at the bar, as we learned today. So very interesting, very insightful to learn from you today, Jonathan, and hear about kind of the Transfix evolution and what's in store for the future to come, and how tech is enabling us to improve upon logistics and the supply chain overall. So really appreciate you joining me on the show today. If people want to learn more about Transfix or get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Go to our website, transfix.io, and everything is right there.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all of that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. And Transfix also has a podcast as well, which I've been a guest on twice now. So definitely make sure that you check that out too. And we'll put a link to that at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So Jonathan, thank you once again for joining me on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.